Hello and welcome to Literary Prospects. I'm Kelly Vick, your host, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest. Ariel Slick is a novelist from Fort Worth, Texas. She's the author of the nonfiction book Ancient Egyptian Mythology, and she co-wrote the Good Harbor Witches mystery series with USA Today bestselling author Jerry White. Ariel's short story Bella was published in the volume Train Journey, and her articles have appeared in Southern Gothic magazine, Texas Highways, the Texas Observer, and many others. Ariel's new Southern Gothic novel, The Devil Take the Blues, is out now. When she isn't taking her beloved cat Kate on a walk, Ariel is running through the forest. Ariel Slick, thank you so much for being here to discuss your enthralling new novel, The Devil Take the Blues. Kirkus Reviews calls The Devil Take the Blues a gumbo of folklore, music, racial tension, and sultry Southern nights. A darkly enchanting novel of sinister alliances and inescapable histories. Reader Views says Slick's novel is edgy. She dares to take on the topics of racism and injustice with a story about the Deep South of the 1920s. Where money talked, blues music wafted in the air, and the KKK was rising in popularity. Slick incorporates these characteristics flawlessly. The Devil Take the Blues has a plot that's full of twists and turns. And the self-publishing review says a stunning read that swelters with tension and sultry grit. The Devil Take the Blues by Ariel Slick is a macabre masterpiece of family, sacrifice, and the seductive charms of darkness, combining elements of historical fiction, crime thriller, and family drama with a helping of sardonic humor. The story transports readers to a Gothic world of smoke-filled blues clubs, graced with compellingly acerbic heroines facing down the greatest of all antagonists. So with that, welcome, Ariel. And what can you tell us about The Devil Take the Blues? How do you describe the book?
So, I guess in a nutshell, I always tell people that it's a woman who makes a deal with the devil to save her sister from being murdered, set in the 1920s. I imagine at the border of Texas and Louisiana, although it's technically, set in Louisiana. And so people have compared it to the film Sinners, if you like that, by Ryan Coogler, just that same atmosphere and vibe. So if you like niche, Southern Gothic horror, you might like it.
I definitely got the Sinners vibe when I was reading. What was the spark that got this story going for you? How did it start out in your mind?
The spark was first reading a lot of Anne Rice novels. I loved the way she described landscape, the way she writes very sensually. She still has a lot of maybe like erotic undertones, but even just in describing, the people, events, so that's like kind of where maybe literary technique came from. And then as far as deals with the devil, I've always loved that trope. So
Mm.
I said to myself, okay, I want to write that trope. I want to, try to write a story where the person makes a deal with the devil and then somehow bests him at his own game.
What drew you to this particular setting of Louisiana, or this border of Louisiana and Texas, and this particular time period of the 1920s?
What drew me first was the studying of the jazz age, the 1920s. I became very obsessed with studying everything about jazz. And that led me to the blues. And so then doing a very deep dive on the origins of blues music and really the setting. I can also point to Anne Rice, just sort of that, New Orleans, Louisiana feel. So it came from wanting to study the origin of music history and like this very, very specific piece of American culture that you can't really find anywhere else in the world.
You have said that when starting out with this book, it was kind of like a love letter to your sister, but also a way for you to process your thoughts and feelings around what's a very complicated relationship. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So when I first started writing this, at a very early draft, it was actually going to be Beatrice more like saving Angelo, like selling her soul in order to save Angelo, the musician. And then as I started writing, my sister was going through, her own very difficult romantic relationship. And it just sometimes I didn't understand, maybe why people stay with someone they are like clearly not, suited for.
Mm.
And so in writing this, it was all the things that I wanted to tell my sister, but then all of the things that I needed to learn myself, as in, people, can and do make their own adult decisions about, romance, but then also being able to let go of control, I think is a really important lesson. I guess for us all, it is so hard to give up control, but that was something that like I had to learn.
Yeah, I feel like there's a line somewhere sort of near the beginning that I felt like, oh, yeah, that's it. And it was very simple. It was like, why do we love what's not good for us? And I thought, oh, yeah, that's like a right on the money line for what it feels like the book is exploring. Um, you have a master's degree in library and information science. So you are adept at research. So I'm curious about how that came in and how what your research process was like for this novel.
Right. So basically, it came in handy because I was able to do a deep dive in databases. I knew sort of what books to look for, what journal articles to read, and being able to compare sources and looking at old photos through the Library of Congress. Um, Honestly, also just talking to other experts who are, far more, knowledgeable. I was able to contact professors, um, universities who, have spent their lives studying blues music, and it was just such a joy to be able to talk with them.
How did you said you sort of went down the rabbit hole from being interested in the 1920s jazz age and then into blues music. How did you originally get interested in jazz and then sort of go down that path?
Right. I mean, I think old jazz was kind of the gateway. I listened to a lot of old jazz in college, and that might just be, I think, listening to a lot of music with my dad from the 50s and 60s, a lot of, oldies, Motown. And so then saying like, okay, what is the origin of that? Like, okay, what's the
Mhm.
origin of that? And so you keep going back and back. And then it's very fascinating to me how a lot of the old stuff, they're singing about the exact same, themes. And now what I discovered was if you listen to some of the really old jazz, you can hear so much music is just based on that foundation. And
Mhm.
so you hear something and it's just a riff of what was, written 80 years ago. So it's still very relevant today.
This is the second novel that you've written. But the first one published, which is a situation that I find I'm talking to authors about all the time on this podcast. So your first novel was fantasy romance. What made you switch to Southern Gothic? What drew you to this particular um, vibe and genre?
Oh goodness. So I think the long story is my first attempt at a novel was going to be historical fiction. And then what would happen is I'd get bogged down in the research and then never actually write anything. So I said, okay, let me just pick something. Let me just do a fantasy novel. I don't have to do any research. It can just be all made up. And so that's, where I started with a fantasy book. And so then for this book, I wanted to do something a little bit more ambitious. And I studied, I have a bachelor's in history. So that, history has always been, I guess, my first love. So I loved, doing the research. And then it just sort of came out as Southern Gothic. The more I wrote, the more I thought to myself, okay, this is going to be more genre specific. But when I first set out, it was just going to be historical fiction. And then gradually, as I started exploring these themes, the themes, I guess, gradually got darker and darker. And so that's when it started to veer into that, Gothic vibe.
There's a lot of wonderful Southern folklore in the book, which I particularly love. Um, can you share a little bit about some of the lore and where you found it?
Yeah, definitely. So some of the lore literally came from like this huge book that I have, it's treasury of, Southern folklore traditions. It has songs, short stories, legends, ghost stories. And so some of that I just adapted and put in because it was just a way of, I guess, preserving, culture. And then
Mhm.
also this huge table, coffee table book of Southern art, Southern literature. So everything from old spirituals to Mark Twain. So I used those two resources almost the treasury on Southern folklore was almost like a primary source
Mhm.
because it still had a lot of this written down. Those are the two main sources.
Do you have a favorite piece of lore?
Oh goodness, I don't think I have a favorite. Some of the ghost stories were really solid. Let me see. Yeah, I don't think there's a favorite, but there was essentially so many stories dedicated to the devil, a devil character,
Mm.
witches, or devil coming in any certain shape or size. And so that was just really fascinating to see, like just how many stories there are about a devil character.
What fascinates you about the devil character in particular? You've said that you've always been sort of drawn to those stories, and this idea of like making the deal with the devil.
Yeah, I think because, I mean, first of all, there are so many stories about the devil and not so many about, let's say, angels or like positive influences coming. And so I think what fascinates me is that people write and ultimately are able to best the devil, even though he's a supernatural character and would have like far more power than humans. I think
Mhm.
it sort of reflects the human spirit of like hope, optimism, in that the odds might be infinitely stacked against you, but people will still try. So I think that's probably a very Southern mentality of just being very, very stubborn and trying to accomplish something just no matter what.
I love that. Um, what is your writing process like? I'm interested in how you kind of come from the spark of an idea to finished work. And also particularly, we talked about the music, but there's these interstitial at the beginning of some of the chapters, lyrics to particular blues songs. How did that come about as well? And how did you weave that in?
Oh goodness. So I'll tackle the music question first.
Okay.
So basically, because I was writing so much about the blues, I wanted to honor like those blues musicians and
Mhm.
to just bring awareness to all of the rich, um, lyrics of blues in the 1920s. And so I was kind of, and one easy part, I was kind of constrained by copyright because what I had to do, like even if you reproduce like blues lyrics, I still had to go back and make sure that it was either A, in the public domain, or B, that I had permission from the music companies to even print it.
Mhm.
So that certainly helped narrow down which songs I chose. And then for each, chapter, I tried to choose songs that essentially reflected the theme or some aspect of that chapter.
And then for your general writing process, how does it
Yeah, so
come about? How does it all come together?
general writing process usually starts with some idea that may or may not have come from a brainstorming session.
Mm,
And so then I'll take that just little sliver of an idea, and it might be as vague as, someone makes a deal with the devil. And so I'll ask myself, like, okay, just more and more specific questions. Who is this person? What might happen? And so at the beginning, it's a lot of brainstorming and just throwing ideas at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I'll ask myself, okay, why is this story important to me? And that's usually where the theme comes from,
mm,
asking why, what do I want the reader to take away from it at the end?
mhm.
So at the beginning, there's a huge brainstorming session, and then once I have enough ideas, then I start to form an outline. So I'm definitely more of an outliner than, the, plotters versus pantsers, writing
Mhm.
by the seat of your pants. So I like to have an outline. Um, and honestly, I will follow a book called Story Genius by Lisa Cron. And there she outlines essentially going from this little idea and making sure your character arc is in sync with your plot. So it's not just random stuff happening, and it's not just your character basically floating in space. So
Mhm.
character development and plot go hand in hand. And so that I honestly follow the steps of that book, and it's been a very good resource.
I've heard really good things about that book, and it's been on my list, but I haven't read it myself yet. So you're inspiring me to to
Oh,
go.
it's definitely, yes, it really clicks the light on for every single choice that your character makes or every single scene goes back to character development. Sorry, I have my cat here in my lap.
Oh, I wish we could see her. Um, and going back, oh, wait, was that her?
Yep, that's her.
Oh, hi. Hi, Kate. It is Kate, right? I know from your bio.
So this one is actually Dominique. Kate,
Okay.
yeah, the 16-year-old, she's in there napping.
Oh, I love it. Have you always been a writer? How did you come to writing?
Yeah, so I would say I would write short stories as a kid, but not a lot.
Mm,
Um, it was really, I took a creative writing course in undergrad. And even in that creative writing course, some people would come in with novels and I would think like, oh, that's so amazing. Like I'll never be able to write a novel. Um, and then after college, I think just one of my teachers was like, oh, Ariel, you should write a book. And she recommended that I read Diana Gabaldon's Outlander. I
mm.
started doing some research on Outlander, and basically, Diana Gabaldon had said the best way for me to learn how to write a novel was to write a novel. So I thought, okay, let me just try. And the only thing that I have to do is just finish it. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be, polished. It just has to get done. So that's really when I started. And basically, I had the courage to say, okay, I'm going to do this no matter what.
And then What was the road to publication like for you?
Oh
A
goodness.
long and interesting road, and you self-published.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to hear
Mhm.
about how that all worked.
Yeah. So for I wrote and then self-published The Royals of Sea and Song. And so that was my first book. So that was the okay, like I guess I can do this.
Mhm.
And so then my second real attempt at a novel was The Devil Will Take the Blues. And so basically, I worked on and off on that, writing it for about 4 years. And that included, cutting out a third, taking out plot points. So after 4 years, I finally had, basically a polished manuscript. I started the traditional querying process. And for a year, I didn't get basically um, any response from literary agents. I queried literary agents and publishing houses, didn't really get any bites. Went to a couple of literary conferences where I met literary agents in person. Um, and the feedback was essentially oh, your writing is great, but I don't see, market vision for this.
Hmm.
So I'll be honest, that was pretty discouraging. And so I went through that for about another year until finally it just sort of clicked of like, I know this is a good book. Like readers, apart from, family and friends, was like, oh yeah, this is a really good
Mhm.
book.
Mhm.
So I decided to self-publish, and that's basically where I came up with like my own personal logo, Hell or High Water Books, because I told myself, like, come hell or high water, this book is going to be published.
Mhm.
So I self-published that, did as much marketing as I can, and now it is in 15 bookstores.
That is so great. Can you talk a little bit more about that self-publishing process once you made the decision that you were gonna go for it? What exactly did that look like from cover design to editing, all of those things that you have to go about now yourself, right?
Yeah, so the main things were editing, book cover, and launch. So for editing, the great thing was I had a friend with connections with really great editors. So they did the line editing, the proofreading. So all right, that's great. I went to ineedabookcover.com, and so I looked up specifically horror genre, contacted a couple of graphic design artists whose specialty is book covers. I did not bother with Upwork or Fiverr to get a generalist. I wanted someone specifically with this niche specialty.
Hmm.
And so this person, I always like to shout out Rachel Kelly of Rachel Kelly Designs. She was absolutely amazing. She gave me three choices that I shared, on Facebook and in different groups. And honestly, the process of picking my own cover was so exciting, and it was so rewarding because it was this is exactly what I want. It's not in the hands of another publishing team. Like I actually get a say in how my book looks.
Yeah.
So that was amazing. And honestly, just so much fun. And then once I had that cover, it really clicked of, this is a real thing. It is no longer this idea in my head, like this will exist in the real world. And then for book launch, I just tried to learn as much as I could. The two main resources I think were Joanna Penn's How to Market a Book,
Mhm.
and I forget his name. It's Guy something, but it's called Ape Author, Publisher, Entrepreneur. And so that those two books were basically my Bibles in essentially the nuts and bolts of self-publishing.
Oh, that's great. And then, so you've launched. How do you actually get it into the bookstores?
Yeah, so Number one, I went to Kirkus and I purchased their review service, their editorial review. I There are two types. One is a little bit less expensive, but there's no guarantee that your book will actually be reviewed. I got the one where it's guaranteed someone's going to read this, someone is going to review it.
Hmm.
And once I had that positive review and they marked it as, yes, you should buy this,
Uh-huh.
I was able to take that and approach bookstores and libraries and say, and I did get a couple of other editorial reviews, but basically Kirkus, I want to say Chanticleer, um, there's like a couple more, but basically Kirkus is the main journal that bookstores and libraries read because they can't read every single book that comes their way.
Yeah.
And so with that positive editorial feedback, I said, look, I have this review. I had posted my book on NetGalley, and a bunch of advanced reviewers read it and had positive things to say about it. So with those two specific pieces of evidence, I said, look, other people like my book, you know, it's about this, it covers these themes, please consider putting it in your bookstore. And so uh, I also really tried to get the personal name of either the bookstore owner or the librarian instead of just saying, dear so and, dear madam. I think in today's very fast and busy world, that personalization does make a difference.
So you are just really like physically sending the emails and saying like, here are the reviews, and that's such a great tip about Kirkus. Like, here are the reviews. Will you please stock my book? And it's worked.
Yeah, yeah. It is a lot of work, but I think it is worth it.
Yes. Yeah. What do you know now that you maybe wish you had known before you started this process?
I will say that I kind of not fell for this, but if you don't have a large marketing budget, I would just stay away from Facebook and Instagram ads if you're getting started. I
Mm.
think I signed up with Ingram Spark to do an ad service. It was something like, $15 a day. Um, but uh, doing it all over again, I think that's probably the one thing I wouldn't do is just spend money on ads if you're basically starting out relatively unknown because it essentially takes a lot of clicks to get to a purchase.
Hmm.
And I will say, although Ingram Spark makes it very easy, um, because Facebook ads are not user friendly. There's a pretty steep learning curve to navigating the user interface for Facebook ads. So the temptation was, oh, Ingram Spark makes it so easy. Um, but I think if you're just starting out, you don't need it. Just do all of the free marketing that you can. Um, and I think, I mean, we basically all dislike marketing, but the thing that changed my mind was other people are excited about my book. I'm excited about my book, and I just want to share my excitement.
Oh, that's a great way to think about it, sharing your excitement about your work. What would you say is your favorite or best advice for aspiring authors?
So, my best advice for aspiring authors, and I would guess that I would like to make a distinction between, writers and then, published authors. So, if you're a writer, don't call yourself an aspiring writer. If you've written two words, you're a writer. So I would say for those people, just keep writing. And it might be cliche, but it is true. Just keep writing and learning as much as you can about the craft. Write, even if it's for 2 minutes a day. And so for people who want to be published authors, if you are, no matter, wanting a traditional deal or doing self-publish, honestly, I had a lot of fear around being labeled, a self-published author, even now, even though the
Mm.
self-publishing world has made huge leaps and bounds, there was this fear that people would somehow look down on me. And I can tell you that absolutely no one ever said, like, oh, this is self-published, like, or like, oh, you self-publish this work, not a bookstore owner, librarian. If the if the writing is of high quality, no one will care. So if you have an idea or a dream of a book, write that book.
That's really inspiring, Ariel. Thank you so much for putting that out there. Um, we have a traditional last question on the podcast, and it is when The Devil Take the Blues is made into a movie or series, what do you think the theme song should be? So much good music to choose from in this one.
Hmm. Probably, I'm sorry for everyone who's going to roll their eyes because they think it's a cliche, but Crossroad Blues by Robert Johnson. It's I was actually going to make the title Crossroad Blues until an editor told me to tweak it a little bit. But if the theme song could be Crossroad Blues by Robert Johnson, I think, I could, sleep happy at night.
I love it. Ariel Slick, thank you so, so much for joining today and sharing all of this excellent information as well. It's been really a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much, Kelly, for having me on. This was so much fun, and I hope that, people listening will be able to take any nuggets of advice or wisdom away and just keep writing.
Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.